It's tough being someone's money. I feel like I have so much to offer, and yet I'm underutilized. I'm stretched too thin. There's no margin. I'm either completely ignored or people are pushing me in directions I don't want to go in. I could provide so much more meaning to people beyond power boats or fancy shoes or new watches. I just want what's best for people. All right? I want them living the dream.
Well, what would that look like?
Terry, great to hear from you. Man, every Monday like clockwork. It's wonderful. Guinea pigs do need saving. Yes, I think giving 5% is a great place to start. You know what you and Melody need? You need to take some time away from the kids and enjoy yourselves. Take that vacation. You blew out both tires at once? Oh my goodness. The good news is that that's why we have our emergency savings. Isn't it amazing? Savings? Check. Giving? Check. So guess what? Now you get to go spoil yourself. You know, go get something fun, like repaint that house, go get that car, buy that new phone, consume your heart out.
Not to burst your bubble, but do you really feel like that's realistic?
Excuse me.
Hello?
Yes, just a moment. It's for you.
This money. Karen! You called back! Oh my goodness, what's going on? Congratulations! You've been saving long and hard for that house. That's amazing. And you got a great rate. Even better. You're the best. No, you're the best. Okay, all right, we got a lot of work to do, all right? Okay, thank you. All right, so what we're gonna do is, first off, we're gonna make sure we get that homeowner's insurance, got a plan for that property tax, a lawn maintenance plan. Have you had someone look at your gutters yet? That's gonna be really important. Cable and internet is definitely a must so we can entertain the guests. You know what? Another thing that I was thinking for fire insurance, something they don't look at. Don't forget your umbrella policy, that's important. Okay, you know what, Doc?
She's gone.
You are the best. Next time, let's talk about you. You know, you gotta up your rate. You know, we all know this ain't cheap. I gotta go. You're a genius. Okay. Woohoo! Therapy works.
There are so many places in our lives where a wait and see approach is appropriate. Should we make that staffing change? Well, let's wait for X to see if we need to. Should we contact my kid's teacher now, or should I wait and see how the day goes? These wait and see moments don't reflect a lack of planning, but they're about giving ourselves the time we need to have a right-sized reaction. But there are other times that we should be more proactive. Like, there are times after a medical procedure that the doctor will advise their patient to stay ahead of the pain. Like, don't wait until the pain becomes acute to medicate, because by the time you feel the pain and recognize the need for relief, it's going to take a long time for the new medicine to work, and it will cause more distress. Or maybe you've heard that it's easier to stay warm rather than to get warm. When your body's cooled down and is playing catch up, it burns more fuel to create heat. Blood vessels near the skin contract and reduce blood flow, and this creates stress on the nervous system. I often agonize over which category a situation belongs in. Like, should I send the email to prepare people that this could be something we watch out for, or should I wait and let it play out? Like, will people be more bothered if I make a problem out of nothing, or if I see an incoming problem and don't say anything? But when it comes to our money, it's pretty straightforward. Our money is something we have to stay on top of. We have to keep track of it and watch where it's going. This wait and see mindset is likely to get us in trouble if we use it with our money. The necessities of life, things like food, clothing, utilities, housing in this market, they're already expensive enough, but when we add to that our bad spending habits, it can often lead us to a place that feels anything but humorous: debt. Debt is a nasty 4-letter word, and if you're living under the pressure of debt, you know how oppressive and overwhelming it can feel. Personal debt is a major problem in our country today. A recent study from the Pew Foundation found that 80% of Americans are caught under the pressure of debt. 8 out of 10 Americans. And despite how common debt is, we struggle to talk about it. We struggle to get help. We can easily feel ashamed or embarrassed about debt, so we keep it hidden, which just allows that pressure to continue to grow. None of us wants to be in debt. So why is it so easy to spend money on things that make us feel regret instead of happiness? Clearly, these purchases don't align with our ultimate values, but we find ourselves making these choices again and again and again. My goal for us today is not to make any of us feel bad if we've made financial mistakes. Most of us can feel bad all on our own. My aim today is actually to show us the way to freedom. I believe that's what God wants for us today. We're in the final week of our series, Money Talks, and during this 3-week series, we've been encouraging one another to examine our relationship with money. This series is based on a series by the same name from Andy Stanley, and I'm also pulling out some notes from my time at Community Christian Church for this message. Money in itself isn't a bad thing. Money is a tool. It's a means to an end. What trips us up is when money becomes an end in itself. The Apostle Paul sent Timothy a warning. Timothy was his mentee, and he said, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." And by the way, lots of people misquote Paul when they refer to this advice. Notice Paul doesn't write, "Money is the root of all evil." He writes, "The love of money," not money in itself, "is a root, not the root, of all kinds of evil." This series is about having a healthy relationship with money. So I want you to use your imagination. I want you to picture money as a person who could actually talk to you. Money sits down next to you and you start a conversation. What if your money could actually talk back to you? What do you think money would say? Well, if money could talk, I wonder if it might say, "Don't lose track of me." To start, I think it's important for us to remember an important principle about money that we find in Scripture. In Psalm 24, we read, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters." The psalmist reminds us, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. God is the creator. God made everything, and that means 100% is God's, and 0% actually belongs to us. And that also means the resources we've been entrusted with are not ours. And for some of us, this means we might need to confront a deeply embedded belief that I've earned what I have. Sure, God's given you the ability and opportunity to work hard, but it all still belongs to God. It's important for us to remember that everything belongs to God, because even people who tithe back 10% of their income to God can forget that it's not just the 10% that belongs to God, but the other 90% as well. It all belongs to God. And so the question I want us to wrestle with today is this: what am I doing with what I've been given to manage? And so now let's take a minute or two to talk about this. Turn to someone you're watching with or put it in the chat. What is your gut reaction to hearing that everything you own actually belongs to God? Jesus told a story that challenges us to wrestle with this question. Matthew, one of Jesus' first followers, recorded the story in his gospel, which is his account of the life and ministry of Jesus. The story starts with a wealthy man going on a trip. He calls 3 of his servants together and asks them to manage his money while he's gone. He gives one of them 5 bags of gold to manage, another 2, and the third servant receives just 1. The first 2 servants go out and put the wealthy man's money to work. They invest it wisely and both end up doubling the money. Now the first servant has 10 bags of gold and the second servant has 4. But the servant who only had 1 bag of gold, he dug a hole in the ground and he hid the wealthy man's money. So we're going to pick up Jesus' story there. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." So things went well for the first servant. After all, who doesn't like getting that nice public attaboy from the boss, like a great big standing ovation? You did great. And the same thing is true for the second servant. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Again, there's a positive report. Maybe you can guess the turn the story is about to take. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Yikes! 2 of the servants were ready to give a good report, and 1 was not. The 2 servants who had managed well were ready for their master's return. The one who didn't was anxious and afraid. What made the difference was not the amount the servants were asked to manage, or even the amount they had at the end. Jesus isn't saying here that people who don't have a lot of financial resources are somehow unfaithful or wicked. That's not the point at all. What made the difference was what they did with what they were asked to manage. What would happen if we saw ourselves as the servants in Jesus' story? What if everything we have has been entrusted to us to faithfully steward? So again, the question we need to ask ourselves is, what am I doing with what I've been given to manage? Like, would we handle our money differently if we saw ourselves as money managers? The reality is we are all managing God's money on God's behalf. So the amount we're managing isn't really the point. Some of us might be working with less, and we're pinching pennies to make ends meet. And some of us might be living in abundance, and yet strangely, we still feel like there's never quite enough. In reality, most of us allow our income to actually match or drive our spending. In other words, if you make $45,000 a year, you're going to spend $45,000 a year. If you make $55,000 a year, you're going to spend it. $100,000 a year, you're going to spend it. $200,000 a year, to which you may respond, not me. If I made $200,000 a year, I would save a lot of it. Maybe, probably not. And I say probably not because your current habit would follow you right up the pay scale. And that's not the only thing that would follow you. Financial pressure would follow you as well. And that comes as a shock because most of us think, man, if I made that much money, I wouldn't have any financial pressure. But you might be surprised. People who make that much money but have spent it all on car payments, a big mortgage, a second mortgage, they feel that extraordinary financial pressure. And so for some of you, this is your story, right? You're making more than you've ever made before, but you feel as much financial pressure or more as you've ever felt. In fact, sometimes it can feel even worse. As Michael Scott said,
more money, more problems.
Although we all know where he actually got it from, right? The Notorious B.I.G. Now, the more money people make, if their spending follows their income, the more pressure they can actually feel. And for some of us, our spending actually exceeds our income. Sometimes this is because our income drops. Maybe we're laid off, or we decide to leave our job or change careers. My family has been there more than once. We've moved twice in the past 2.5 years, and the second time was rather unexpected. And both times, it seemed like the expenses just ballooned. But often our spending exceeds our income, not because of those kinds of circumstances, but because we spend and borrow until we're upside down. And so we have to wrestle with this question. What am I doing with what I've been given to manage? Do you feel responsible and accountable for how you're managing God's wealth? Or are you the kind of financial planner that God would have to let go? Turn to someone or put it in the chat. What's one place that you manage your financial resources well, and one place that could use some improvement? The reality for a lot of us is we just don't know where our money goes. I mean, could you give a detailed account of where your money is going? Do you know where it's gone, or is it just gone? The truth is that many times we don't really know. And because we don't keep track of what we're spending, we might be in danger of mismanaging what we've been entrusted with. When that happens, we often find ourselves in stressful financial situations. We might have good intentions, but until our actions match our intentions, we might be falling short of our calling to be like the first two servants who were good stewards of what the master had entrusted them with. Imagine with me for a moment that this third servant had talked to the first two. Like, what if they had worked together? It seems like the third guy didn't share the same financial knowledge. He didn't even think to put the money in the bank for interest. What if the first two servants had brought him alongside them to help him know what to do? We all have room for growth here. There's a next step for each of us to grow in our responsibility, intentionality, and faithfulness to the things of God's kingdom. Maybe your next step is to seek out help. Maybe it's to offer it. So let me ask you, how might your style of money management change if you live from the knowledge that God truly owns it all? And as God's child, God's unlimited resources are available to you. Pastor Andy Stanley says, what you do with your resources is a direct reflection of whose you are. If you belong solely to yourself, that's a very small life. How might our hearts for generosity grow if we saw ourselves as managers, as stewards of what we've been entrusted with? Well, the very first step in learning to manage God's resources well is to step back and discover where our money is currently going. Money is saying to us, don't lose track of me. And so here's the challenge. We're going to get super practical today. We have a practical challenge for us to help us focus on what we're learning. We're going to spy on our money together. That's right. We're all going to spy on our money. So right now, think of your favorite spy movie. You know how the spies who are just like really good at their jobs are super observant. They notice everything. No detail slips past them. That's how we're going to track our money. I'm not talking about making a budget here, because a budget is a theory. It's a plan, which is super important. But what I want to challenge us to do is to actually keep track of where we're sending our money, how we're spending it. Because if your spending doesn't match your budget, the budget is doing you no good. The reality is that most of us don't know how well we're managing what we've been entrusted with because we don't really know where our money is going. And so when we actually look at where our resources are going, we'll begin to see what we really value. Sometimes we need to get curious about ourselves to find a way forward. Could you give an account of where your money went this past month? Do you know where it's gone, or is it just gone? So here's the challenge. Money is saying, don't lose track of me. So if you want to grow in how you are stewarding the resources entrusted to you, I want to encourage you to try a 30-day tracking challenge. Over the course of the next month, try to record every dollar you spend. There are a few free apps out there that can help you do this in a really simple way. Mint, YNAB, which is You Need a Budget, and Good Budget are a few that come to mind. These apps link to your spending accounts and then upload the transactions into a place where you can sort them out. And this helps you to see how much you're spending on categories like groceries or utilities. Now, some of you are a bit more old school and you prefer to track your spending manually. You might even use a checkbook register. Some of you don't even know what those are. And so I'm kind of like placing myself in a specific age range here because I'm old enough to remember checkbook registers, but young enough that I have Never, ever used them. But then after 30 days of spying on your money, set aside some time to reevaluate where it went. Really look at where your money is going. Look for areas where you think you can cut unnecessary spending, and then go a step further and have someone you trust. Maybe someone who is like the first two servants in our story, who knows some of the tricks of wise money management. Have them look over your tracked money with you. They may be able to help you, give you some ideas about how to be wise in your spending, and this is going to feel particularly challenging going into the holiday season. If you're anything like me, you're going to be tempted to look away, to ignore how much you're spending on holiday things. Every year I tell myself that our gift giving and spending is going to be simple, and every year it seems to grow and grow. Last year I had the brilliant idea that we're going to focus on experience over more things. Stories over stuff, right? So we made this plan to surprise our kids with a trip to Disney World and Universal. And let's be real, this also doubled as a chance for us to get out of the Midwest winter and warm up in Florida at the end of February. But despite our best financial plans, our debt snowball went in the wrong direction. We didn't save enough before the trip, and then we overspent on the trip. And I found so many opportunities to just gather stuff along the way. And this is why it's so important, especially at this time of year. Because if we're not keeping track, it almost definitely will get out of hand and set us up for failure in the new year. And once you actually know where your money is going, you can ask yourself, what does where my money went say about where I am going? What does it say about what is most important to me? And then ask God to help you grow in how you're stewarding the resources that God has given you for God's kingdom work. Ultimately, this 30-day tracking challenge will help us answer the question, what am I doing with what I've been given to manage? It can help us discern which servant we're like from the parable we discussed earlier. So now turn to someone next to you or put it in the chat. What ways have you tried to track your spending in the past? And did they work for you? I hope you will take on this challenge. And I know that for many of us, this seems like the last thing we want to do in the upcoming holiday season. We just want to be happy and have fun. I get it. Tracking our spending doesn't exactly fit anyone's definition of happiness. I know that following through on a practical exercise like this can seem really hard or overwhelming for some of us. But remember how Jesus' story describes the master's words to the two servants who managed his money well. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The two servants who managed well got to celebrate. When we live like these two faithful servants, when we really live as if everything we have already belongs to God and we're simply stewarding God's resources for God's purposes, then we can have a healthy relationship with money. And it can actually be something that draws us closer to God and affords us the opportunity to share in God's overwhelming joy. When we steward the resources entrusted to us to love God and love our neighbor, we will share in a true and lasting happiness. Money can be the source of incredible stress, and it can be the root of all kinds of evil, but when we hold it in its proper place and use it for its proper purpose, when we keep track of where it's going and are intentional about those choices, it can be a force for good in our lives and in our world. The truth is, we all want to have a handle on our finances. We know that ignoring our spending and hoping everything will work out doesn't usually work out. We know there's a better way. God wants to set us free from any unhealthy patterns in our relationship with money. And God is inviting us to enter into true joy of managing everything in our lives for God and God's kingdom purposes, just like Jesus modeled for us. So the question is, are you willing to reset your relationship with money? Will you faithfully steward what has been entrusted to you to love God and others? Will you celebrate together with God?